Good Monday morning. Well, I was reading, finishing up the book of Joshua, and this story struck me that I've kind of never noticed before. You know, in the lives of the children of Israel, they were given a promise of the promised land. And when Moses sent 12 spies over to spy out what the promised land looked like, only 2 came back with the report of the Lord, if you will, the report that matched the promise. And it was Joshua and Caleb. So because the people didn't have belief that God would keep his promises to get them to the promised land, the Lord let that generation die out, and now Joshua is here to take the promised land. And when he gets to the tribes and he is addressing the tribes and they're surveying the land, he asks one of the tribes, he says this, it's chapter 18. Joshua then said to the Israelites, "How much more time are you going to waste before you go and take possession of the country which the Lord God of your ancestors has given you?" And that really struck me in light of metaphorical lands or promises that God has given us that for whatever reason we are not yet possessing them. And one of the tribes right before that had not taken over their land because they had yet to dispossess, it says, this is in the previous chapter, the Canaanites. Because sometimes we don't possess the promised land God has given us because we are yet to address the Canaanites in our own land. And so it kind of made me ask myself the question, are there any ites in my life that might be preventing me from possessing some of the promises that the Lord has for me? And I thought about what some of those ites can look like. Sometimes it's unbelief, like the previous generation. They just don't believe that God will come through on his promises. Sometimes it's pride. Sometimes our ite is our own pride or our own self-sufficiency or our own thoughts where we want to try to figure it out, or, okay, how am I supposed to do this? What is this supposed to look like? And not that God doesn't give us wisdom and discernment and strategy, but we were, Eden fell because of self-sufficiency and a moving towards self. Another ite we might have is fear. We're afraid. We're afraid of what it may cost. We're afraid of what it may require. Or another ite could be we just don't want to surrender that piece of our life. We want to allow God to be in all these other places, but don't touch this place. And so it just struck me that if there is a promise that God has given you for your story, like I know he's given me mine, is there a reason why I'm not yet possessing the land God has already promised me? Are there any ites up in here that just haven't been dealt with, that God is still waiting on me or you to get out of the land? So just food for thought this morning. I don't want any kind of ite preventing me from the promises of God in my life, for my family, for my calling. And I know you don't either. So we're in a season where there's a sense of urgency, and we just can't be people who aren't possessing the things that God has given us to possess. So it might be that we need to take some real aggressive stock of our hearts and make sure that we have given the Lord full access to search our hearts, as David said, and to let us know if there's an ite we're not dealing with, and if there is an ite, then we need to deal with it promptly, because we don't want to be wasting time. It's just not that kind of season.